After beating Lynn, I give her to Pinette just before we return to the Somniel, in case I forget. I train Jean to level 5 to learn the Martial Master skill Diffuse Healer, and after all this time, I finally do my first skill inheritance and pass over Corrin's quality time to Seedall. I then engrave a killer bow with the Fates emblem to bring its base crit rate to 60%, hopefully allowing Alquist to reliably perform some critical lunas, and bond-wise, I do Corrin and Delir's C rank, as well as Louis and Ike's B rank. As for the supports, with their newfound friendship, Pinette takes Ivy to some spooky ancient ruins to share her love of ghosts, which Ivy does not harbour the same sentiment for, as she tries to maintain her slowly decaying composure without being dismissive of Pinette's tastes, until she inevitably snaps and flees screaming. Tamara excitedly greets her fellow future queen Ivy, and they briefly share their opposite viewpoint on how much both of them have in common, with Ivy eventually revealing that she's never been camping, which shocks Tamara, and she invites Ivy to try it out with her sometime, to which Ivy maintains an open mind and gracefully accepts. Now we travel near the Brody-Illusia border once again, but this time for the next paralogue. We get to the ruins of an old fort, which prompts Ike to briefly summarise his experience from Fire Emblem Path of Radiance Chapter 8, and then he questions us on what we'd do in the same situation, before actually putting us in the same situation, where we're positioned at the centre of the map, and unlike Ike's experience, there are some breakable walls that the enemies can take advantage of, which, back then, I guess were added so Ike can get some mileage out of his Demolish skill. We're surrounded on all sides, and now there are some enemies with their respective class skills, as well as a few having additional skills on top, which made me dread what was going to happen before it even started. For example, there are some enemies with the Blow series of skills, the Seal series, the Stance series, and one that's more funny than scary is the Self-Destruct skill on some of the enemy Martial Masters. Ike is chilling at the very top of the map, and just like Lynn, he won't move until a few turns in. Since Louis has temporarily been relieved of Ike, I give him Sharina S. I pass over a hammer to Pinette because of the numerous armoured units, then I put everyone into position, and we begin this mostly defensive battle with the goal of defeating the Radiant hero. From turns 1 to 4, we defend from the obvious choke points near our position. Louis, Clan and Ivy defend the west, Alir cordons off the south in flames while everyone else deals with the east. This mostly works out well aside from Pinette dying once because Merrin didn't protect her enough times with Bonded Shield, and there was also Alquist getting burned to a crisp because I didn't have Merrin set to defend him too in the first place because I thought he'd be safe, and of course I used a Time Crystal charge for both of them. Just before turn 5 starts, Ike declares that he's coming for us and summons 3 sword cavalries to his side. At this point, our defenses are already getting breached, and there are still reinforcements incoming, this time 4 generals from the south, and the same sword cavalries from before, that also come with the Void Curse skill we haven't seen in a long while, and to note, all reinforcements on this map from this point have this skill. Turn 6, with how pressured we are, I find that the central position is no longer sustainable, and I ponder my options on how and where to break out from, eventually concluding that I should control the eastern side, because Ike will catch up and block us from getting to the stairs safely if we take the west route, and going south is not an option due to the concentration of enemies. So praying that Ike travels west and that no more reinforcements appear, Pinette and Ivy start clearing a path. Now, let me posit to you with a question. Which way does Ike go? A. East, the direction I didn't want him to go, or B. West, the direction I did want him to go? The answer? It's C! Straight through the fucking middle. That's right. See this castle part that isn't marked as destructible for the player? Yeah, I could just casually demolish it, so now we're surrounded. We take on more attacks and eventually Alir dies just before we make it to the next turn. For a while I ponder on whether I should travel back a few turns, but I decide to first see if I can salvage our current predicament. So back we go to the start of turn 6, redo the attacks to the east and somehow make it to turn 7, utilising Bonded Shield to protect Ivy, who burns away the generals on the enemy phase, so we only have the Sword Master and, annoyingly, Martial Master in our way. While we do take the two out and finally have the means to progress east, there's just one liability, and that's Louis. While I'm confident that he can tank the cavalries after being healed, there's this sage that he can't escape from unless we defeat this cavalry, blocking the only safe tile he could move to. We try to crit with Pinette. That fails, we travel back, see if we can somehow make Astrostorm work. Not really. We could have used it to nuke the sage, but that would require sacrificing Pinette. So I end up making the decision to travel back all the way to turn 4, and I become more aggressive in our elimination of the east side enemy forces, no longer caring about blocking the western choke point, and we successfully manage to open a path on turn 5. We barge through the Martial Master and Sword Master on turn 6, and we have Louis cover the team's rear. Ivy is unexpectedly killed, so we make sure she's healed to be able to tank that spear on the new timeline. Ike busts through us before, though we're already out of the center by that point. On turn 7, Merrin and Ivy fully clear out the eastern map boundary, Illyria impedes the north path by igniting it, Pinette finds an opening to Astrostorm the sage that gave me a headache a few timelines ago, and grabs the Elthunder tome from their distant corpse, which we throw into the convoy. 3 sage reinforcements appear in the area we want to control, which we dispatch with Jean, Ivy and Merrin on turn 8. Pinette blockades the stairs with her illusions, Illyria layers on the Vein of Flames and does so for most turns hereafter. Then Ike crushes through the last destructible wall. Turn 9, Ivy breaks her rescue staff to bring Louis to safety. Jean gives Louis some treatment, a refreshed clan moves to Illyria to exchange his thunder for Elthunder, and Louis takes Pinette's spot on the stairs. The illusions are shattered and Ike refuses to enter the flames, then it's time for turn 10. Pinette recharges at the Emblem energy tile to our right. Ivy and clan siege with Elthunders from below the walls while Alcrus backs up Louis and Illyria, and Jean treats Merrin. Louis takes the brunt of the enemy attacks while Illyria gets attacked once. Terrifyingly, the same 3 sword cavalry reinforcements appear from the north, 4 enemy sniper reinforcements appear from the west, and then there's the 3 sages again. This will be the enemy reinforcement package each turn from this point forward until we beat the map, to really hammer in the Tellius experience, enemy phase length and all. For the next 2 turns we remain at a stalemate, with Illyria maintaining his pyromaniac tendencies, everyone else struggling to deal with the 3 sages spawning each turn, while I worry about our dwindling healing resources. I accidentally get clan killed at one point and of course we jump a timeline for that, and as annoying as the sages are, they got easier over time, as Pinette was eventually able to reliably one-round a sage on her own after she gets enough speed taker stacks, and heck, even Jean can do the same, though with the help of Illyria's personal skill. This gives us some breathing room to swap out Louis and Merrin on turn 13, as Louis will better tank the archers trying to come from the south, much like his experience from the Ike Paralogue. Despite this, I'm still overcome with despair as Ike is too deep in his army for us to do anything. Those in my stream suggested to bookmark the map and take a break as we were nearing the 4-hour mark, but I chose to persevere, and finally, a ray of hope appears just before turn 15 starts. Do you see that? No sage reinforcements appeared, and I immediately realized that we've hit the enemy unit cap for this game, which frees up our non-defender's actions, which is just the opening we needed, as now we can open a path for Ike, and he finally strikes at Merrin on turn 16, quickly disappointing me with Ragnar's 2-range attack reusing L-Surge's animation instead of its OG shockwave. From this point, Ike's defeat is sealed. Turn 17, Ivy strikes at Ike first with Elthunder, but then I realize I could have had Merrin inflict poison too, if she had the silver dagger equipped, so I burn a time crystal charge just to do that. Ivy's refreshed to attack again, and Illyria augments Merrin's avoid with the Vein of Fog. We also open the tile in front of Illyria, which leads to the general in front of Merrin to take that spot and cause Ike to attack Merrin from a 1-tile range this time, only to get fully poisoned. Ivy breaks Ike's first revival stone on turn 18, Pinette engages and Astrostorms Ike, then the second revival stone is destroyed by a refreshed Ivy and a crit from Alcrus. This time Ike confronts Alir directly with his hammer, and now we're on the final turn. Ivy initiates once again, depleting over half of Ike's HP, with the help of Merrin and Pinette's backup, and finally, we end the map by engaging Merrin and attacking with All for One.
Our bonds give me strength. Let's begin.
Look here.
Not done yet.
Not over yet.
It was a good fight.
Ike congratulates Alir for overcoming the overwhelming gods and gives a bit of a pep talk on how he'll be there to keep our spirits up. Alir and I display gratitude for Ike's presence, and then our Max Bonds level is unlocked with Ike. To match the pace of the previous video, let's move on to the next paralogue. And just a quick note, I forgot to press record on OBS for this part, so I'll be using the stream file that YouTube has. First off, the Somniel Again, where I have Louis inherits the Resolve skill from Ike, mainly to test if it makes the Plus version cheaper, and then we accelerate their bond to level 15 by having them beat each other up. Following that, we also see the C bonds for Jean and Byleth, Merrin and Lucina, as well as Pinette and Lynn, where with the latter duo, I have them tussle to get their bond to level 6, so Pinette can get the both proficiency required for me to reclass her into a warrior, so she gets access to bows, and eventually a better class skill. We also reclass Jean to the High Priest class to give him access to tomes, and because my crappy reading comprehension at the time made me think that the Diffuse Heal skill from the Martial Master class would give his healing a splash effect. I refined the Fates Engraved Killer Bow to +2, and the Brave Axe to +3, then we move on to the supports. Jean treats a minorly injured clan as repayment for his advice on learning from your mistakes, and they affirm a newly formed familial bond to cap off their A-rank support. Alchrist is fascinated by Seedal's story of the wolf jousting sport, praising the detail of each tale he's been regaled. We then learn of Seedal's origins, with parents who died when he was young, before living on the streets and eventually invited into the travelling caravan, where he was taught how to dance. Amber shares with Pinette tales of an old mansion that he has plans to explore, that potentially houses the spirit of a knight that once lived there. Pinette, being the ghost lover that she is, would love to see the place, and Amber suggests they check it out together. Speaking of spectres, we travel to Illusia for our next paralogue. We enter the Sacred Tomb, a mimicry of the Holy Tomb from Chapter 11 of Fire Emblem 3 Houses, and Byleth provides a brief history lesson on the place and the legend of Saint Seros, up until we get to preparations for the combat class, where numerous crystals litter the map. The enemies here are around 3 to 4 levels higher than in Ike's paralogue, so they all have their respective class skills, and again, a few have additional skills on top, including a new one that I mistook for life and death, but thankfully is something a little less scary. Byleth is located on the opposite side from our position, is rocking 3 revival stones and some very scary weapons. He is also surrounded by other very scary fabrications, 3 of which have a single revival stone each as they represent Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude, the house leaders of the titular 3 houses. The scariness factor is further compounded by the martial masters adjacent to Byleth, as they both have a warp staff in possession, and by that point, I was dreading the carnage they could deliver, and don't get me started on the phantom worms just below the ledge, with a 1 to 4 ranged attack that ignores defense and resistance, and which will one-shot my characters except for Alir, Pinette, and Louis. To add insult to injury, they have the Spirit Strike skill, which lowers the survivor's engage meter by 5 bars. Aside from ensuring Pinette has some bows and Jean has a tome, there really isn't much preparations-wise aside from setting everyone's positions and letting the lesson begin, where we're provided an optional objective of defending the crystals, before we're given our primary goal of defeating the instructor. For the first move, I end the turn, resulting in quite a good chunk of the crystals being damaged but not destroyed. Then we annihilate 2 fabrications on the left and 2 on the right on turn 2, while also positioning my characters on the assumption the enemy might not prioritize the crystals, and from this enemy phase, the opposite turned out to be true, and the enemy destroyed their first crystal. Turn 3, I push a bit more aggressively with this affirmed knowledge, taking out a Sword Master on both sides of the map, as well as Astrostorming a Sage on the right. Another crystal gets destroyed and the Phantom Worms start moving, who, as far as I was aware, don't attack the crystals. Turn 4, to aid in our push, Jean freezes the worm on the right, and for the left, we have Merrin move next to the nearby thief to engage and activate Bonded Shield, simultaneously aiding in the elimination of the thief through backup hits and to protect Panette from the left side worm, which turned out wasn't necessary for this turn, aside from the general that attacks her next because there was no crystal in its attack range this turn, while on the right, a third crystal gets destroyed. Turn 5, we have Jean and Dalcris defeat the left side general, despite putting them in range of the worm, thinking I could defeat it with just Panette and Merrin, which they can, but it could potentially result in Merrin's death, so I resort to call doubles and bide my time. As for the right, Louis solos the worm with the aid of Seedal's dance, while Ivy takes care of the general on their side. The remaining worm gets baited, while the sniper and sage units make their way down the stairs from the far sides of the upper ledge. Conveniently, the ones on the right lined up nicely, so on turn 6, Alir engages and switches from firebending to waterbending a torrential roar. Ivy takes care of the thief that slept behind, Louis sweeps up the 2 archers with Seedal's aid, and Jean takes out one of the sages. On the left, I have Panette shred as much of the remaining worm as she can, and Clan is able to finish it off by eliciting Merrin and Panette's backup attacks. Merrin bonded shields Panette, protecting her from the subsequent sniper's attack, and now some Griffin Knight reinforcements appear near Byleth. Turn 7, Jean removes the remaining enemy on the right side, and Louis takes the nearby Emblem energy tile, anticipating Warp Staff shenanigans soon. As they couldn't comfortably dispatch a safe number of snipers and sages, we have the left side retreat towards the right. Ivy flies in to heal Panette twice with Seedal's help, letting Panette live to turn 8, where now we have the Griffin Knights to deal with too. I have Alir attack one of the snipers to freeze both with Corrin's dreadful aura. Panette eliminates one of the sages while Louis deals with the other. Initially I had Clan burn the right sniper to death, but I time crystalled back to electrify the other one instead, to keep the furthest distance away from the ledge. The enemy finally start using their warp staves. First, Fabrication Dimitri and Edelgard are warped down, and Byleth uses Goddess Dance to refresh the warp staffers so they can also warp the archers too. Thankfully, Byleth was merciful here as he commanded his army to ignore our units, and then he gets 2 more Griffin Knights, which occurs every other turn from this point. Now on turn 9, the exception I mentioned about the enemy targeting happens here, as after we clear out more enemies and destroy one of Fabrication Edelgard's Revival Stones, we're still mostly ignored for the most part, aside from Fabrication Dimitri, who seem to have a grudge on Clan, which is baffling considering the other Fabrication house leaders had units they could one-round or one-shot near them. Anyway, the only thing I needed to correct was Clan's positioning. 2 more crystals are destroyed this turn, the first due to one of the warp staffers warping the other warper so they can warp Fabrication Claude, and the other is blown just by being in range of the remaining sniper. Entering turn 10, the last sniper bites the dust thanks to Panette. We also put down Fabrication Dimitri with Merrin, Clan, and a refreshed Panette. Louis prepares a Great Ether to catch one of the Griffin Knights, then Fabrication Edelgard is melted by Alir and Jean, till finally Alcriston dive with Great Fabrication Claude's Revival Stone to end the turn. The warper on ground level warps one of the Griffin Knights forward, while the other refuses to warp Byleth. Turn 11, aside from the warp staffer, the remaining ground level enemies are scattered to the wind, while Louis has Ragnar ready to intercept Byleth only to get ignored. Since no more crystals get destroyed, we're gonna focus on the conflict with Byleth for the remaining turns, and that starts with Louis on turn 12, getting a dual assist from Merrin to start the poison stacks, taking half of the first HP bar in total, which Alir follows up with a torrential roar, rooting Byleth in place. Merrin comes in to bonded shield Alir because of the Sword of the Creator, and Jean takes advantage of Merrin's protection area to break the first revival stone. Merrin protects Alir as expected, and now we're on turn 13, with Louis and Alir breaking the second revival stone. Merrin sets Bonded Shield again, and fails to activate it this time, causing Alir to eat 43 damage. And now we're on the final turn. Louis breaks the last revival stone with the help of Merrin's backup. Ivy flies in from the northwest to rain down an Elf Thunder before we finish off the Instructor with a stuttery Astrostorm.
As if I'd lose.
Man, Panette and Lynn is such a strong combination.
Nothing left to teach.
Oh, and more strength, more speed? Heck yeah! Well done, you protected a good number of crystals. You received a talisman as a reward from Byleth. Okay, a talisman? I'll take that. I'll take a talisman. "14 turns. That took less time and less turns than Ike's." Alir praises Byleth's ability to teach, though I'm unsure of what lesson we were supposed to learn here. Anyway, the latter reaffirms they'll stay with us till the end. And so, our max bonds level is unlocked with Byleth.